and thank you for checking out Value Driven Life. I am your host, Coach Chris McMahon, and I'm just very, very lucky to get to sit down and chat with Susan Niebergall, who is an online weight loss coach. She works with Jordan Syatt for his Inner Circle, and she has a book out too. And she has her own podcast, and she has quite a social media following. So if you're not following her already, you're missing out. But Susan, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be able to be here and see you and connect.
Yeah, to be frank, I folks, I think they're pretty much aware of this, but I just love to learn and to be able to talk with people. That's why I started the podcast, and in an effort to be able to answer questions for folks too, whether they be my coaching clients or folks who pop up on Instagram. And sometimes I send messages to people who I really admire and who just put out such wonderful content that I think one demystifies a lot of the things that float around in the internet space, but two, that they're genuine humans, and I think that that's what allows people to really connect and resonate with them. So I was just really thrilled that you responded to my message and were okay to hop on here. So I don't know how often that happens where folks reach out, but either way, I appreciate the time.
It's my pleasure. And just for the record, I love chatting with people and getting to know people. And I continue to learn as well. So, I've heard people say, I'm just so surprised that you said yes. I'm like, of course I'm going to say yes. I mean, there's no question I'm going to say yes. We just have to find the time that works.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, Susan, for folks who don't know you or aren't aware of you, the way I've understand it when I've heard you chat about it on podcasts or from just different places, basically around the interwebs that I've seen, you got started relatively later with fitness, while you might have been involved with it like quite a bit. And I was wondering maybe if you could describe like what kind of sent you down trying to kind of maybe have a better understanding or get started. I Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I've been around a gym for a long time since before I was pregnant with my son, and he's going to be 25 this year. So, I've been around a gym for a long time, but I never really had um, success per se. I mean, I built some strength and stuff like that, but I never had the nutrition part and the training piece put together by a person. So I just went from trainer to trainer in a gym, never really getting any results, just like so many people, right? And I'm not blaming the trainers because actually I had some pretty good trainers along the way and I learned some stuff from each one of them. So it's not a knock on them. It's just that going through those decades, you really didn't have the people that had the whole package together, right? That's not how it was. Gym trainers, you saw them once, twice a week, and that's all. That was it, right? You didn't have a trainer that was working with you on your nutrition. Matter of fact, they hardly ever even talked about nutrition. They kind of left that to you. And so I did that for so many decades. And, it's interesting. And it's been, I'm 62 now. So I think when I was in my mid 50s, like 53, 54, something like that, I remember just literally looking down at myself. I was in the bathroom going, what has happened to me? Like I had grown this belly. I feel like I still couldn't shake weight off. I was a fitness professional at that time. And I'm like, what is going on? I feel so out of control. I feel like a victim. Something's happening to me. I went down all of those roads and the menopause road, which is the most common one, and associated with that, hormones or metabolism. And so when I started thinking of it in that way, it was kind of like, oh, this makes sense. I understand what's happening to me now. I am a victim of this. So now I need to go to my doctor and get checked and get my medication. So I'm no longer a victim. And now everything will be perfect. So I did all of that. I went to my doctor, had the blood work done, and she came back and she goes, Susan, your blood work's fine. And what I didn't know then was that was the best news I could have gotten, right? But I looked at it as a gut punch because for so long I had been blaming everything else for the reason why I can't lose weight and keep it off, right? And so for the first time ever, all the things I was blaming it on, menopause or hormones or metabolism, blah, 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 I couldn't do that anymore because I had proof now. So that forced me to actually have to look at what I was and was not doing. I had to be honest for the first time in my life about this. I had to be brutally honest with myself. And when I accepted what she said, because I didn't accept it right away, I was like, no, you don't know what you're talking about, all that stuff, right? The usual. But when I finally let it sink in, I started thinking, yeah, you know what? Let me see what I can do. And I started making small changes, some kind, changes that I recommend people can do when they're first starting out. Like I just changed portion sizes. I didn't write things down, but I would recommend people just write down on a piece of paper what you're eating every day. That would have helped me tremendously back then if I had just done that. But I did make some progress. I was seeing some progress. So then I got a little cocky and I thought, okay, I know what I'm doing. So now I want to, I was really doing well in the gym. I got a fire lit under me by a trainer that I was working with. I'm like, I want to power lift. I really want to get strong and blah, blah, blah. And so I hired Jordan as my one-on-one coach, but I only hired him for that, for the lifting piece. I didn't hire him technically for nutrition, but I did join his inner circle. I did put into practice a lot of his nutrition stuff, and then as my one-on-one coach, we did a lot of talking eventually about nutrition, and he helped guide me, and I learned so much from everything he did. He really is the catalyst that has changed my life. And yeah, lo and behold, everything started to change. Everything, how I viewed exercise, how I viewed food, what I was doing. And so, that was when I was 53, 54. He and I have been working together for a long time. And he still writes all of my programming too, by the way, which is kind of fun. But my message now is just plain and simple. Look, we want to blame it on everything else but us. But the reality is we control this narrative. And if I can do this, anybody can, because I am not a special genetic freak. I have health issues. Currently I have health issues. I have health issues on my side of the family, obesity in my side of the family. So it is not that I am gifted this. It is I worked and think the biggest thing was I became honest with myself for the first time ever. And so all of that put together, change started to happen. And my message is that it's never too late to change. And that's really why I subtitled my book, It's Never Too Late. And so my book is called Fit at Any Age, It's Never Too Late. And it's just, I call it a fitness memoir. It's my story, super easy to read. Like you could read it in a sitting or two at max, right? But it walks you through all of the issues and the mistakes I made for decades. And when you're my age, you speak in decades. This is how you do it. It is all about decades now. And so I literally did all the dumb things. And my point in putting all of this out there is to show everyone, look, we can do as many dumb things as we want, but it's never too late to change, right? And so that's kind of my mission now, is just to kind of get that out. I feel like I want to blaze this trail for others who are younger than me, in their 50s and their 40s, or even younger, just to bring this out there. So that's kind of me in a long-winded nutshell.
I love the long-winded nutshell because it's really important to highlight this one piece that stands out. The one is putting I guess basically putting it on yourself to be aware of these things. And there's a lot of discomfort around that for a lot of folks because we're human, right? There's ego that gets wrapped up in a lot of these things. And even for folks who are more experienced, if we can relate it to weightlifting, you have like ego lifting where you're lifting and it's something you probably shouldn't do and you're ignoring how your body feels, and then you get hurt and then you
Yep.
blame it on the programming, but it's really probably because you just weren't listening to what your body was telling you. So there's a lot that's wrapped up in there. But the second part, Susan, that really, I think that's why I feel very lit up by what you talk about, is you said, like, I wasn't genetically gifted to be able to do X or Y. I wasn't this way from a young age. I wasn't necessarily an athlete because for
Mhm.
me, I grew up, I did musical theater. I was in the marching band. Right.
Yes, former marching band director right here.
That's
Love
right.
it.
I was a little drumline and percussion, so,
Oh, you're
right.
one of those. Okay,
Uh,
I know you. I know your type, you percussionists.
Yeah, so I grew up doing musicals, doing all that stuff, and in my house, I grew up and my mom and dad were always doing Weight Watchers, and I would go to weigh-ins with them, and I saw them
Mhm.
weighing their food, and I didn't really understand that, and then when I was 10, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, so I had, like, all of this stuff floating around in my head, and the last thing I wanted to do was anything with fitness. The
Mm.
first time I went to the gym was, like, my freshman year of college, and the person I went with knew how to lift. They were a soccer player, and I couldn't straighten my arms out for, like I remember this, I couldn't straighten my arms out for the whole first 2 weeks of school, and my roommate, who was a random person, I had to ask him to help me get my shirt on and off. So it was like, there's this other end of the spectrum where it's like you go all in
Yeah,
and you go too far in,
yeah.
and you have to figure that out and get yourself back in. So I particularly like that. Susan, did you find that as you started to do any of this, we can even go back to when you first started, there was this level of like, all right, I just have to get this right. Like if I get this right, then everything's going to be fixed. And get this right can kind of mean whatever you want it to mean. Like if I just find the perfect workout program, if I just eat the right thing, then I am going then there's nothing else that I have to do. Like it's going to cuz that's how I felt when I first fell into this pretty
Well,
much. And
it's
I
interesting because I felt like I was eating the right things. I felt like I was doing, and when you brought up the ego part, that's exactly what that was for me. I was the clean eater girl, right? Never shall pass through my lips anything that wasn't clean, whatever that means anymore. It's a word that just makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up now because I was the idiot that used it all the time. And while eating clean or healthy and nutritious foods is what we want to eat most of the time, you can take that way too far and wear it as a badge of honor and think that somehow you're doing yourself a service by only eating foods like that. When, if you think about it, life is not like that. And you can't live like that. You cannot be a perfectly clean eater and have a happy, healthy life. It's not a healthy relationship with food. And I was not aware of that. I thought, based on all the garbage that we grew up believing, right? That what I was doing should be enough. Like, why should I bother about portion control, man? I am eating all healthy stuff. It's good for me. That's all I needed to worry about. That's what I was thinking. And so my ego, and I love that you use that word with regards to, I've never really heard anybody say it like this. And I'm so grateful that you did, because that's what actually was the problem. My ego tied to that was keeping my wheels spinning. Like,
Mhm.
it can't be me because I'm eating this clean food. And I talk about how outrageous this went for me in my book. One particular time, I was a school counselor for so many years, and in our little counseling office, we would celebrate each other's birthday. And oftentimes, people would bring in cupcakes or a cake, and we'd all get in there, sing happy birthday and blah, blah, blah. People would pass out the cupcakes or cake. And every time I would say no. I would say, no, thank you. And then every time I would do that, people would say, Susan, I don't know how you do this, man. You're so disciplined. And they kept feeding this narrative in my head that what I was doing was something amazing that everyone wanted to be able to do. But the irony here is, inside, I'm looking at them going, I want to be like you. I want to be able
Mhm.
to eat the cupcake. Like, I wanted to have a cupcake. My God, I love cupcakes. I love cake. I love all of that. But I wouldn't allow myself to have it because it wasn't clean, and I felt like that was going to ruin any kind of progress that I was making. And the irony was, during that time, I was making no progress.
Yeah.
But when you're in living it in the time and you're consumed with this false sense of whatever, you don't see any of that. And so I wrote about that in the book. And I think it's a really important point, because I feel like people in my age bracket who have been on this planet for a while, almost all of us have gone through something like that. And it's a true awakening and it's, I think, like you said, it's not easy to look at yourself and finally realize, all this time I haven't been doing myself a very great service here. I haven't been doing as good as I could have been. I mean, that was a tough nut to swallow for me. It was. I readily admit it. But that brutal honesty is what changes us,
Mhm.
right? And it
Yeah.
doesn't make us crazy on the other end. It just puts into perspective. Gosh, we overestimate how much, we underestimate how much we're eating. All the time we underestimate it. Every single one of us do that. We get better at it as we track more and we learn and that kind of thing. But little things like that, oh yeah, this meal's only about 500 calories. No, it's like about 1,200 calories, something
Yeah.
like that. It's crazy what we all do. But yeah, it's and I think this is why I'm called the mother of tough love, because I call people out on this a lot. And that is, you're not being honest with yourself. I mean, plain and
Mhm.
simple. I say that to people because they tell me their whole story and I can hear it all right away. I know because I did it. I did it too, So it's not like I'm like better. No, I did all of that.
It's so powerful when you put it in that light or when you can explain it that way, Susan, because the way I look at it, or even why this podcast is titled Value Driven Life, because a lot of what I've come to find in working with nutrition and training, if we look at it from like the perspective of like our values, what's actually important to us, that's what we want to live a life that is driven by those values. However, in the beginning, we can closely choose our identity to be wrapped in whatever that value is. And maybe we're not clear on what it is yet. Maybe it's a little dusty, right?
Mhm.
Maybe we do value fitness, but for that person who's valuing fitness, they're valuing how they look and not necessarily how they perform or how they feel. And
Yeah.
it's because we have those four levels of like that motivation, right? It's like we have to go super extrinsic before we can get intrinsic, and folks miss out on that usually. And it's just wonderful to hear you put it in that light, to hear it as in like, no, 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 no. It's okay if you find out that you're necessarily I'm putting wrong in air quotes or wrong or making a mistake or not understanding this. Because for me, I mean, when I first started in this industry 10 years ago, it was like I knew no I went to school for music. I didn't go to school. I knew nothing about nutrition, I knew absolutely nothing, right? And I can remember, and I've told this story before, but I can remember being in a consultation and coming out after, and my PT manager handing me this like list of a food. Actually, it was from like the precision nutrition textbook back when they did the textbook only and there was no
Mhm.
online portal. And it was just the list of like all the grass-fed food and all the super healthy foods. And you should hand this to your client and be like, these are the foods that you should try to eat. Like, this is what you should be eating. There was no structure around explaining it. Um, and it's funny, the clients who did it, yeah, they would lose weight, but then they would gain it back because you're not really teaching someone how to fish.
Mm.
You're just,
Right. And that's such an important point because one thing I talk about in the book is I lost 50 pounds with Jenny Craig way back in the day. And they give you these small little trays of food and you eat them and you're going to lose weight, right? And I did. And on the surface, oh wow, it worked. Well, no, it didn't. Because if it worked, I wouldn't have been a yo-yo dieter for the next 30 years. Um, I I just did what they told me to do. I'm a teacher, so I'm a good student. You tell me what to do, I'm going to do it. And I did. And I remember, I mean, and it's hard to remember that far back, to be perfectly honest. But one thing I do remember is being hungry all the time. And then I think, well, yeah, because and I'm showing Chris here on but the trays of food were like this big. I mean, of course I was hungry. And what I knowing what I know now, if I knew that back then, I would guesstimate I was probably eating 1,000, maybe 1,200 calories, something like that. So of course I was going to be hungry, and of course I'm not going to be able to maintain that. Of course, I didn't know any of that back then, right? So I feel like I think that is very common. I feel like we were brought up during that era to think that less is better. You have to eat less, like lettuce, chicken, and broccoli. That's it, right? In order to lose weight, you need to suffer in order to lose weight. And what I didn't understand, and I understand all too well now, is that promotes the most unhealthy relationship with food you can imagine. And those people are the ones that are struggling. In fact, I posted yesterday about how 2,000 calories or 1,800 sounds like so much. And it's because we're so used to having to suffer and lose weight at 1100, and we couldn't do it. I mean, no one really can do it. And we can't do it because we can't be consistent with it. And I went through the whole scenario of, yeah, you do it for a day or two. Anybody can kind of hang with that probably. But then after that, it's like you're grabbing little bites and snacks here to take the edge off. Those are adding up, which you're not even thinking about because they don't keep you feeling full, right? So you keep grabbing, and then you get to a weekend and you're thinking, I've been so good this week. I need to go out and have some fun with my family and friends, blah, blah, blah. And you basically blow the whole weekend to bits. And there you are starting over yet again on Monday. And that cycle just keeps going and you never progress from that. So it's not so much that that doesn't work for me. No, it would have worked for you had you stayed literally 100 calories. My God, you would lose a lot of weight. The reality is you weren't staying at that, but it felt like you were, And I think that with people in my age bracket, this is a real thing. Like we grew up this. And so with this, so it's kind of like the mindset stuff that has been ingrained in our heads for decades. We're trying to chip away at and change. And that's tough, right? That is tough. I mean, you've probably had clients like that. I certainly have. And the DMs I still get every day, I'm still answering the same kind of questions. People don't get it. And I understand that. I understand their background because I was one of those too. And it's not a one and done. It's like you don't flip the switch from on to off and you're cured. This is a constant thing that you have to keep talking to yourself, remind yourself of. I mean, and just surround yourself with people who know what they're doing, like you and other coaches. Get a coach that knows what they're doing, that can help reinforce what's really happening and help guide you to change that.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an important point here, Susan, is that unfortunately, those people, like even so, your generation and then the generation after you who have kids who are my age, because I'm 32, so I'm right around your son's age, and then their people who are in their 40s, like from their parents, they also learned from their parents or were around those articles, or like me going into Weight Watchers with my parents and watching them do all these things. And hey, look, they lost weight. So here's a magnet that goes on the fridge. Let's celebrate you losing the weight. You gained the weight back. There's no celebration for you or anything. You feel really bad about yourself. I'm going to stop this, right? The cycle, it's cyclical for every generation. So
Mm-hmm.
even right now, the people who are DMing me and messaging me are early 30s,
Mm-hmm.
some in their 20s. I've had people message me who are they look like they're freshmen in college. My wife is she is a choreographer and a dance teacher at a performing arts school, and these kids, they had to go to the health office for their like physical, and there were some girls who were crying because they didn't want to step on the scale. They're so young and so impressionable. So I just think it's so powerful and amazing to be transparent and to be honest and to be able to say, no, it's a little, the system's broken,
Mm-hmm.
and it's okay to be honest, and it's okay to have your feelings hurt a little bit hearing these things, but that's when you're going to learn the most. That's when
Yeah.
you're not going to you're probably going to make a ton of mistakes. But that's how you're going to develop self-compassion for yourself. That's how you're actually going to be able to be flexible with yourself. I don't know
It's
your
like,
thoughts on that, Susan.
well, it's like, what would you say to your friend, if
Mm,
they were struggling? You wouldn't say, "Oh my God, what are you doing? Man, you have screwed everything up." No, you would never say that. You say, "You know what? You're fine. Just keep going." Blah blah blah. Nice, compassionate things for your friend, and yet we don't do that for ourselves at all, right? But interestingly enough, I find that there's a contingent of people too that are the victims, like perpetually the victims. They Everything is happening to them, and they get very defensive when you
mhm.
try to have them take some kind of responsibility. And that's a tough one too, right? Because people will get defensive. I get it. I was in that place at some point too. And that's not an easy place to be. It's not fun. It's so much easier to blame something external for our problem, right? While we're not reaching our goal. It is just the easy way out. And to me, I I I I feel like you have a choice here. And people will tell me, I know, but it's so hard. Well, no kidding. No kidding. It is hard. No one's ever said that this was going to be easy, ever, especially as you get older. It gets harder as you get older. It just does. But okay, so now it's hard. Okay, cool. So now you have a choice at this point. You can say it's hard and then just say, screw it, not going to do it. Or you can say it's hard and you're going to roll up your sleeves and do it anyway, and you control it. That's the cool thing. I don't care if you're 40, you're 20, you're 30, you're 50, whatever. You control how this is going to go. You do. And when people think of it that way, a lot of times it's like, oh my God, yeah, I guess I do. And the people that say, well, calorie deficit doesn't work for me. Well, I'm sorry. That argument needs to be just thrown away because it works for everyone. It's a scientific fact. So it may not have worked for you because you were never really in a calorie deficit. That's why. And can some physiologically diagnosed issues cause that calorie deficit number to be lower than maybe you want? Yeah, of course. And that's why if you think you do have an issue, I tell everyone, look, go get checked out, get the blood panels done, know what's happening, because what you may find is that it's none of those things. And that's great news. That means you are in 100% control. And then if they come back with an issue, then work with your doctor on getting the appropriate treatment plan and medication for that issue so your playing field can get back to where it needs to be, right? And for most of these conditions, that's what can happen, right? And then you just follow it because calorie deficit will always work. It just the numbers may not be where you want them to be, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel them on that, but the reality is it will always work. It's not just always great to hear that, like
Yeah.
because people just feel like it won't work for them because of all of those years of being on such a restricted diet that they can't be consistent.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, Susan, is I had this question actually yesterday. I did a Q&A, and the question was, this person had asked me if what would be the best way for them to gain weight, and I said, well, a calorie surplus, and the way you track that is you could use your goal body weight times 12, or you could use like a precision nutrition calculator, and then I talked. You want to make sure you're eating enough protein, and then their follow up question was, well, what if I can't count calories or I don't know how to do this? And my first response was, well, you don't necessarily have to count calories. You could look at other metrics, right? You still have to look at data points and be like, okay, do my clothes fit differently? How are my energy levels? You could do that, but looking at your calories in and of itself makes it easier. It will be harder in the beginning, but it does make it easier. And I
Mhm.
think one of the things that I've noticed and that I now suggest a lot is like, okay, if your goal body weight, if you want to put on like, let's say, if you want to lose like, let's say 40 pounds, and you see that the goal body weight number for that calculation, if you do it times 12, if that's a big deficit for you and you're not ready for that, there's nothing wrong with aiming for like the first 10 pounds, the first,
Yeah.
right? That still counts. Like it
Yeah.
still counts. And I think it makes it that much easier for someone if we look at chunking it. And I feel like, Susan, your career thus far, that's what you've done. You've chunked it for yourself. It was like I had this speed bump and then I figured this out. I had this point and then I figured it out. And I had this point, and I just think it's a beautiful thing that folks can see and hear. Um, I don't know how you feel about that with just the realization that it's okay to go it's okay to go slow. I think
Yeah,
I think you
well,
nail that on the head.
there's no finish line to this anyway, so there's no rush. And I've often said that if and this is probably one thing, and I wrote this in the book too, that this is the one thing that sticks out in my mind that was a big life changer for me is when I finally embraced the no finish line mentality. Like
Mhm.
I I I I don't have to do this like in 2 weeks, right? There's no rush. I'm not going to get a prize. I'm not going to win the lottery. There's no finish line. It doesn't exist. We feel like there's an end date to this. And when we think of it that way, we're thinking too short term, right? Anybody can lose weight in a week. Anybody. Just don't eat, right? And you can lose weight, but you will never be able to maintain that loss at that rate. And so that's why taking your time is actually going to be to your benefit, because you will learn to navigate rocky waters, because life will throw you curveballs no matter how prepared you are. One day life's going to blow up in your face and you're going to have to wing it, and all the rest. This happens. This is what life is. But you learn from these ups and downs, and this is how you do it without the pressure. And once I embraced that, I took this heavy burden off my shoulders. And I feel I cannot put adequately into words the liberation I felt, the pressure that was gone to have to perform, to lose weight. I should be losing this much weight. I should be getting stronger. All of that was gone. There was no more should be's. There were no more onlys. I just focused on what I was doing in the present moment. And the whole thing about that is I was enjoying it. Like,
Mm.
I mean, being in a deficit's not like fun, but I was thinking, okay, I'm going to eat in a deficit. I'm going to get into the gym. I'm not going to pay attention to my deficit anymore. I'm going to get into the gym and I want to get chin ups. And so I gave myself that goal. And told Jordan the very first day, my goal is I want to be able to do chin ups, because at that point I was on a band. And then I wanted to be able to clean up my push-ups, and then I wanted to deadlift a certain amount. And then, I mean, I just keep giving myself goals, and I still do. Like, I have a bunch of performance goals that I have on the agenda for me as I speak. And it's something that changes everything. It changes how you look at everything. It makes it more fun. And it's interesting when you focus less on outcomes, like the weight, especially when we're talking about weight and the number that we are obsessed with on the scale. When you stop focusing on that and focus on performance and getting stronger and building and all of that, the outcomes happen. It's really one of these things that happens when you can focus on positive behaviors and things that are going to improve your health and stuff. The other stuff happens.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, having goalposts, or they kind of become like a guiding way. And it's an interesting conversation too, because sometimes folks can get so attached to a specific goal, right? That they might not want that goal anymore. And it's
Yeah.
okay. It's
Yeah.
okay to pivot. It's okay to have something else. What's really cool, and to relate it back to what we said before, is if you're clear on what the value is, then you're allowed. The value is kind of like that beacon. It's kind of like your Google Maps. It shows you how to get, and the goalposts are like your little steps along the way to help you get to closer to whatever that might be for you. And I think that's important, because a lot of people will go into it with the goal of losing weight, and then suddenly, like a month or two, and they're like, "Oh, wait a minute." I had one client who was like, "I just really want to be able to wear my kid on my back and go hiking like I used to do." And
Yeah.
then suddenly it's like, "Oh, okay, I can focus on that."
Yeah.
Like, if I eat X or Y, I feel better and have a little more energy. So then I'll be able to do this, right? It's having goals are just so important, and
Yeah.
underrated at a certain point too, you
Oh,
know?
100%. I feel like that helps keep your training focused too. Instead of just going in and checking the box, I worked out today, and wondering why you're not maybe seeing the changes that you want to see in your body. You're going to the gym all the time, but really all you're doing is just doing random workouts and checking a box and saying I did it, and then expecting all of this stuff to happen when you're not really even, you're just eating healthy. That's the other thing. People just say, when people talk to me and they say, I'm struggling, I'm not losing any weight. And I say, okay, so tell me about what you're doing. And out of their mouth comes this: I lift 3 days a week. I do, yoga 2 times a week. I'm run 4 times a week. I'm adding HIIT twice a week now. I'm doing my zone 2 cardio every single day, and I'm not losing weight. And I'm like, you have yet to mention the one thing that's going to actually help you lose weight. None of that is going to be what's going to make you lose weight. And then I would say, so how about your nutrition? What are you doing? Well, I'm eating healthy. Okay, so therein lies the issue. I like to use this analogy because it makes sense to most people, and that is, we can think of weight loss as a car, and this car, the weight loss car, has a driver and a passenger, and the driver of the weight loss car, or any car for that matter, is the person solely responsible for getting you from point A to point B. Your car's going to sit there in the driveway if there's no driver in it. I mean, right? So the driver of the weight loss car is nutrition, has to be. you won't lose anything if your nutrition is not in check. And there's many different ways that you as an individual can keep your nutrition in check, but it has to be in check based on that goal of losing weight. But we all want training to be the driver of that car, right? Because it's so easy to add another workout. It's so easy to, add this and do these different classes or whatever. But training's the passenger riding shotgun in this car, right? Training, think of it this way, training's the guy with the roadmap, the old-fashioned map, and he has it in his lap, and he's trying to direct you to keep you going the direction you want to go. But it's not training's job to get you to lose weight. It's nutrition's job, because nutrition drives that car. So if you think of it that way, that's how we need to look at weight loss, right? If you're
Mm.
struggling with weight loss, the first place you need to look is your nutrition. We can talk about training over here, but nutrition's got to be where you look. And then I also like to say there's a passenger in the back seat too, and he's a wise ass. And he will start talking and tell you to turn left. He's going to tell nutrition, look, turn left. Here's a shortcut. I guarantee you, turn left, turn left, turn left. And that's emotion, right? Emotion sitting in the back seat trying to get you to turn left. And we often do, right? Because we panic because the scale hasn't moved. And so we turn left. And when we turn left, we're in the middle of frickin' nowhere. And now we got to find our way back and get back to that path that we know deep down inside we should have stayed with from the beginning. And I feel like that sums up the journey for so many people, right? And it makes sense. So we have to work on keeping emotion like locked in the trunk, maybe, you know, and even invite our logic voices to be in the back seat to confirm that we're doing the right thing. Maybe it's better to have logic in the back seat and emotion in the trunk, something like that. But when you compartmentalize it that way, everything has its role, and we need to make sure we have in our head the appropriateness of the roles. Like, what is nutrition's role? What is workout's role?
Yeah, that's such an interesting way to put it, Susan. And if we even lay out the sciencey facts, it's like, yeah, you don't burn as many calories as you think you're burning from even resistance training, and the calorie burner or whatever you're wearing on your watch, that's not accurate at all. So you can't, you shouldn't really be training or doing those sorts of things looking to burn calories, because that's
Yeah.
just not going to work out. And the other part of that with emotions is like, yeah, it's like if we just look at our emotions and we simply like, I don't want to say give in, because emotions, they're there for a reason. I had a friend and he said emotions, feelings are flashlights. Like they shine a light on something that's actually going on. And if we try to
Hmm.
dim that light, that's when it tends to get out of control. And it's like, yeah, so what do we do in that instance? Like it depends on where you are and on like if you're an emotional eater or things like that. But usually recognizing the fact that you're having the emotion and okay, you had the emotional eating episode. It's like, let yourself do that and then talk to your coach, talk to your therapist, talk to whoever it might be. Maybe it's a coach and a therapist, which is a winning combo. I'm in therapy. It's amazing. It does wonderful things for you. Because then what you do is you get to shine a light on what started it. And then you get to start to work backwards and be like, okay, how do we break this chain? How do we break the chain of events? Okay, I had this hard moment. Okay, I'm in the middle of this deficit. It's really hard for me because when I usually have that argument or that hard conversation with someone, I usually go and eat the whole line of whatever it might
Hmm.
be. I'm going to pick Twinkies. Not my
I love
favorite.
Twinkies.
All right, those are your favorite. My favorite's probably like an oatmeal raisin cookie. Uh,
Love that too.
so but if that's the thing you normally do and suddenly that's not there, it becomes that much harder because it feels as if like, oh no, I've identified this thing that I have to restrict. I can't have it. And then when the opportunity does come up for you to have it, let's say at a party or something, you're like, I'm gonna have like 12 of these
Yeah.
because I never get to have it, right?
Yeah.
So it's all connected. So it's like, let yourself have the moment and then look at what started the moment and then look like, all right, I had a big feeling here. Practice being able to identify what that feeling is. You can use the feelings wheel. You could read Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown. You can find out there's more than like 3 feelings out there. You're allowed to have them. But then you can look at how you diffuse that feeling. Like what you said, put the emotion in the trunk. It's like, yeah, let the emotion, let it, you know what, even let it ride in the bucket seat, because you can still recognize that it's there, but then you can use a different option or an obstacle plan, whether it be like, I know you and Jordan, you have your walking pads where you guys get your steps in. Like daily walks, or usually all of my clients are doing that, and we're tracking steps, not because I care necessarily that you have to hit 10,000 steps. I care more about the mental and emotional side of things, and your ability to uh, remove yourself from that emotion and let it pass. And then suddenly, after 20 minutes of walking, you're like, oh, wow, I feel better. And it's like, yeah, of course you feel better.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to go deadlift like 300 pounds to feel better. Because for guys that I work with, they might use fitness as a way to get out all their anger and frustration and stress. But when you can't train like 7 or 8 7 days a week, you need other options. So it's just such a beautiful and interesting conversation, or a way to look at it.
And I think the bottom line is it comes with awareness. I mean, that's where it starts, right? You have to be, and I always use with the word awareness, honestly aware, right?
Mhm.
There's got to be a level of honesty here. But when you become aware that this is happening, that's the first step, because there's so many people who just deny that anything's wrong, right?
Mhm.
And they're the ones that are continuously stuck. So if you can recognize, if we'll use emotional eating as the example, let's say, um, that you emotionally eat, like when you've had this awful day at work, people yell at you, whatever, blah blah blah, you want to go home and you just get out that whole thing of Oreos or something, and you just want to go to town on them. I tell people this is not something that will be, again, a one and done trick, but yes, you can maybe start getting a little more control over that. And an easy way, for example, not the only way, but a way to try to get control over that emotion is put some time between you and that impulse to grab, because it is an impulse. Emotional eating is all impulsive. And if we can not act on that impulse in that moment, delay a little bit, what we're going to find is that impulse goes down, if not go away. So for instance, you have that bad day, you're ready to go hard on some Oreos, right? Set your watch time or whatever for like 15, 20 minutes. Get out of the kitchen, go do something like fold laundry. I don't know, go outside. If you can go outside for a walk, that's the best, but do whatever, you just get out of that for a good 15 or 20 minutes. When that alarm rings, so time's up, notice how you feel then, right? And I can almost guarantee you that impulse will have gone down dramatically, if not gone away. But let's say you still have a little inkling. Okay, cool. Go back into the kitchen, grab the Oreos, put some on a plate, sit down at the table and enjoy them. I mean, allow yourself to enjoy them. So a lot of things happened here. You've kept from eating the whole thing. You've allowed yourself to enjoy, obviously, something that you like, right? You wouldn't be reaching for something like that if you didn't like it. And when you allow yourself, it takes on a whole different feel. Like this isn't like you're not thinking, oh, this is bad. I shouldn't be doing this. I can't stop, blah, blah, blah. You're not thinking any of that, because it's a mindful decision. You put some on a plate and you sit down at the table and eat it. You don't grab the package and start stuffing them in your face. You're mindful about this. This is such a great way to handle emotional eating. And what people find is the more you practice that, because it does take practice, just like anything else, you're going to get better at it. And pretty soon you'll be able to call it. It's just one of those skill sets that, yeah, you know what? It proves you are actually in control of this. Because people feel so out of control, when the reality is you still control this, which is very, very empowering, once you can truly embrace that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that pause, that initial pause. And the thing that I think people do sometimes, they're like, I did try pausing. But if you try and pause and you're sitting in the kitchen in front of whatever you were thinking about eating, it's not gonna work out, because you're not giving yourself a chance.
Yeah.
It's kinda like if you're pausing before going to get seconds, or whatever. If you're sitting at the kitchen table and everyone else is eating the delicious dish, that's not gonna work out either, because
Yeah.
everyone else is eating the delicious dish. So it's having this level of awareness. Susan, for you, do you find, or do you have do you feel like you had a support system while you went through all of this? Like for me, my wife is aware of the things I do. She's also someone who is physically active. Uh, our family members are, it's helpful, especially when you're going through any of this or trying to make any sort of these small changes, even in the beginning, letting someone else know what you're doing gives you that extra level of, while it might be scary to tell someone what you're trying to do, that level of, I don't know, like a safety net or like just someone that you could talk to about what's happening.
It's interesting. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that before, ever that I can think of. So super interesting question. And the honest answer is no. When I was going through this for most of my life, I never really communicated about it to most anyone. Um, I did see a therapist. I don't know. Gosh, it's been so many years now. I don't even can't even put a hand. I mean, like 20 years ago, maybe 30. I don't even know. And I probably spoke about it then, but it is something that I could have benefited from day one. And it's not like I felt like my husband wouldn't be supportive or any. It wasn't any of that. It's what I chose to do, and I feel like I if I had made a different choice and maybe had more support early on, potentially, it could have helped me. But I will say too that life was very different 30 years ago than it is now from that perspective, right? It and not as an excuse, but it was because the information that we were being fed back then is not the same kind of message that we are trying to get out to people now. And so I feel like that would have been I don't know if it would have been as conducive because there was so much conflicting stuff out there, and I just wasn't aware enough of what was actually happening, what I actually needed to do. I was being pumped with false information on what I needed to do, and none of it was right. I needed to overly restrict. I needed to take these little appetite suppressants. I needed to do all these things, and yeah, so while I didn't talk about it to anybody really, and my husband's not this is not he's a musician too, by the way, theory comp major. So this is not his area of expertise. He's an expert in a lot of things. This is not one of them. Um, I don't know how helpful it would have been, but that really changed for me when I hired Jordan, to be perfectly honest. He became that, beacon of light for me. And, you know, could be my kid. He's your age, right? And so he was that person. And this is one reason why he and I connected so quickly as we did. And now we work together. And we feel like we make such a great team because of our age difference, to be honest. I bring a lot of different perspective to the table from decades of all this kind of stuff. And he has brought a lot of work and research and simplicity and even tough love to the table. And so that changed in my mid 50s. And so again, it's not too late either, right? It's not too late. If you don't have that beacon of light in your house, you don't have that support system. That support system could be you, Chris, as a coach for somebody. It could be me. There are plenty of us, and I know we hang in the same circle of people. It's so funny. We hang in this circle of people. We all feel like we're friends, and then if we ever see each other in person one day, it's gonna be like, "Hey, how's it going?" When we've never met each other in person. It's so. This is why I love the internet. But I feel like in our group of people that we all connect with, the common group of people, that any one of those people could be that beacon of light for somebody. I truly feel that way. So I guess putting out there that there's hope if you feel like you don't have that person in your life right now. I understand that can be very difficult. Um, but you can find that person. I mean, I did.
Yeah. That's just wonderful to hear, Susan. If someone wanted to work with you or learn more about you, what are some different ways they can do that?
So right now, the coaching that I am doing is in the inner circle with Jordan. And that is, for those that don't know, it's an online fitness community. So it's kind of group coaching. And it's a great affordable alternative for people that can't afford 101 because 101 is pretty expensive, right? And we just supply structured strength training programming, which is vital for you as you age. Um, You'll never have to think of what to do ever again, which is great because we have so much for you to choose from. We provide nutrition guidelines for whatever your goals are. We have a huge members portal full of video courses and manuals and things as a resource for you. We've got a community where you can connect with, and that, to be honest with you, is probably the most important part, is just knowing that you have like-minded people who are going through similar things as you are to connect with, to finally have somebody that gets it, and that can support each other, hold each other accountable too. There's that piece of it. So Jordan and I kind of head all of that up, and we do live Q&As with our people, and we email. I mean, we try to keep our hands in this pot as much as we possibly can, because we want this to be something that is reachable for anybody. So that's the coaching that I'm doing right now, and you can find out more about that at sfinnercircle.com, and watch the video that's on there. He and I literally just updated that last month, and it goes through and tells you how we work, and what we supply, and it's very thorough, and it's like 10 minutes long. It's a little longer than what we wanted, but watch it because it'll answer all your questions.
Oh, I love it. And Susan, what's the name of your book again, in case folks want to pop on Amazon to pick it up?
It is called Fit at Any Age. It's Never Too Late.
Ah, I love it. So Susan, the last question I ask everyone usually is, if you could go back in time, you can hop in your DeLorean and you can go back in time and uh, give yourself a little piece of wisdom when you're first getting started with all this. So it could be when you first started working with Jordan. It could be back when you were doing Jenny Craig, whatever it is. Um, what do you think that little piece of advice you would give yourself would be?
I would probably tell myself, look, you don't have to be perfect with this, because I think that was the underlying thing playing in my head, because that led to the clean eating, that led to basically eliminating foods, right? That kind of thinking, and that all just affected everything. And I feel like that affects a lot of people. They feel they're all or nothing. You have to be all in or not. And while being super motivated at the beginning of everything is great, sometimes it can be, a hard kind. You set the bar kind of high to maintain that level of enthusiasm, because God knows it's not always going to be like that, right? But I was really hung up on being perfect, and I think that would have helped me dramatically. And I wish I had reached out and tried to research more nutrition stuff back then. I don't know how helpful it would have been, honestly, in the 1990s and maybe even the early 2000s. I just don't know, because it was so different, the kind of stuff that was coming out. So I guess maybe that's wishful thinking. And maybe I should look at it more like, look, I survived, you know? And again, it's never too late. And maybe that's the best way to bring all this kind of back to full circle, is that it's just never too late. That's the cool thing about all of this.
Ah, I absolutely love it, Susan. I think folks are going to get a lot out of this. And I want to thank you again for being here. And if folks are checking out this episode because they're fans of yours, I'm so thankful that you're here and listening to this episode. There are a ton of other interviews and mini podcasts that I have that you can go and check back on. And if you could give me a 5-star review and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to this, it'll help other people be able to listen to it too. So thank you again, Susan.
It was my pleasure. Great to meet you and great to chat with you. This was amazing.
Thank you very much.